You're listening to Henry's Becoming, a podcast that focuses on the emotional journey of an entrepreneur from the thought of their business to the execution and beyond. I am your host, Henry, a serial entrepreneur, speaker, real estate investor, landlord, 21-year retired Army veteran, and author of When the Bank Says No. I'm sitting down with entrepreneurs to talk about their processes and the lessons they've learned along the way. Fasten your seatbelts. The journey is rough, but rewarding. Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Henry's Becoming. In this episode, I have to submit a disclaimer. Due to the technical difficulties, the audio of this podcast sounds as though Rahkim Sabree and I were on two-way radios. I'm requesting that you have a little patience with me in my learning curve and get the valuable information that he is offering. Be sure to have a pen and paper available to jot down the jewels that Rahkim Sabree has left us in this podcast. Turn the volume up and relax. Through patience, I can only get better.
And I struggled a lot before I put the book out with this idea of credibility and that who is going to believe or listen to me? I'm not a millionaire. I'm not, this guru in the world of personal finance. I can't stand next to Grant Cardone and Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki and all of these guys. What are my accomplishments? My accomplishments are happening now. But I changed my mindset around that too and saying that, you know what? I'm in the trenches. Like, my story is relatable. I've accomplished things that, most people aspire to accomplish, and before 30.
First of all, let me just thank you for agreeing to do this interview with me. I have read your book, Financially Irresponsible, and the title in itself is jarring. It's like, what? It's the complete opposite of everything that we're told to be. So before we jump into your book, I do want to get just a little bit of background. So you answered some questions for me. So let's start with where are you from, or where did you grow up?
So I'm from Mount Vernon, New York. So that's in Westchester County, considered the suburbs of the city, with air quotes.
Right.
The city that I grew up in is an urban city. It's about 4 square miles. I don't know the population density, but I know that it's pretty high. There's a lot of people there.
Okay.
And it's majority minority. So there's a lot of African American, Caribbean, Latino, Hispanic. There's an Italian section, and the high school that I went to was extremely diverse, with Caucasians being the minority. And when I say the minority, I mean, like, I probably counted 5 in the 4 years that I was there.
Wow. You're the oldest of several siblings. How many is several?
Let's see. So there's 4 in addition to me.
Okay. And so, okay, with you being the oldest, is there a large gap between you and the younger ones?
There's a large gap between me and the younger 2. So my first 3 siblings, my brother and my sister, they're closer in age to me.
Okay.
I have a younger brother who's 1.5 years younger than I am, and a younger sister who is 6 years younger than I am.
Okay. So you didn't. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. My parents separated, and they've had children respectively. So I have a younger brother who is literally 18 years younger than me.
Oh, wow.
And I forget the age difference, but I think 15 or 16 is the age difference between me and my other younger brother.
Okay. I have a younger brother who's 17 years younger than me, so I can definitely relate to that. So being the oldest, then you didn't have to, you definitely set the path or the tone for the the younger children. So you go ahead.
Yes and no, because all of us are very individual, unique, following our own paths. But I think I definitely set an example
Okay.
for them to kind of work towards, and especially the older of my younger siblings were more close in age to me. I think now, especially, they're more starting to kind of see the value and the direction that I've taken, and in their own way applying it to their path. So there wasn't like, oh, Rahkim did this, so I need to do this. I think, in fact, it was probably the opposite. Rahkim did this, so I don't want to do that. But I don't want to speak for my siblings.
Okay. But okay, so you were an example in one way or the other. I asked you, did you grow up in an entrepreneurial household? And your response was that you didn't, but the importance was of entrepreneurship was stressed. So who stressed the importance of entrepreneurship, and how did they stress it?
I think it's important to kind of just give context to the background of my family structure. So my parents were 17, 18 years old when I was born.
Mm-hmm.
So as I grew up, they grew up, and we all kind of grew up together. So my grandfather played a large role in helping to kind of, I don't want to say supervise, but guide the growth of my parents and as individuals, but also me and my earlier siblings. And he always taught us about those heavy influence and focus on African culture and being connected to your roots, and this extreme pouring of self-esteem and self-worth into us. And as part of that, I believe foundational to that formula of self-esteem and self-worth is ownership, this idea of doing for self. So that came from the top down. My grandfather pretty much, I don't want to say beat it into our head, but we talked about it often. And then my parents both kind of echoed the sentiment. It's hard though when you hear that and you don't see it. So you're like, okay, cool. Like I know where I'm supposed to go, but what is the formula for getting there?
Absolutely. That is very true. But you found your way. So it sunk in at some point and you just took action.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about, you've written 2 books.
The first book I released in 2018 is called Mentorship, the Playbook. Mm-hmm. And the second book I released in 2019 called Financially Irresponsible.
Okay. And you said you reading the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad helped you realize that you wanted to be an entrepreneur. So what about that book helped you into becoming an entrepreneur and an author yourself?
Rich Dad, Poor Dad, there is a Robert Kiyosaki, the author, introduces this concept of the cash flow quadrant, right? So there's if you can imagine, kind of a cross, and on the left side of the cross, the top and the bottom boxes speak to being an employee. Mm-hmm. So you are getting a single income from a job that you work for somebody else. And the emphasis there is you're trading your time for money. Underneath that box in the same column is a self-employed business owner who is doing the same thing, but they're working for themselves. So they're trading time for money, but they have their own thing. On the right side of the quadrant, there is a business owner in the top right-hand corner, and then underneath that, there's investor. So business owner, different from self-employed business owner, is someone who owns a system, and that system can be duplicated over and over. They're not trading time for money because the system's in place, so they're making money in their sleep. And really, they're just they're building. So I think at that point, your focus is definitely on scaling and making this operation kind of run smoothly without you having to be involved. And then in the bottom of the quadrant on the right-hand side, there's investor, and that's people who are taking money that they make and they're making more money from that money. And so when he talks about the cash flow quadrant, he talks about how most people make their money on the left side of the quadrant. And the goal really should be to move from making a majority of your money from the left side of the quadrant to the right side of the quadrant. It's not to say that you can only exist in one of the four quadrants, because a lot of people make money from several different points. But it kind of speaks to, what's important to you. Do you want to continue to trade your time for money, or are you looking to make money consistently over time without having to have much involvement? And just really a mindset shift from, like I told you, this idea of having a business and being an entrepreneur sure is great. I can own a storefront, and then my success is based off of me getting up and going to work every day. Or I can create a system and own the business that somebody else works for me and still make money off of that. And so once that idea kind of sunk in addition to a lot of what he spends time on, talking about the difference between assets and liabilities, or this concept of purchasing assets that will then fund the purchase of liabilities. And of course, what he's known for, real estate investing, it kind of set me on a path to say, not only is this something that's possible for me to achieve, but something for me to aspire to. So I began at that point to consume a lot of his content in the various ways that he delivers it. He has a huge Rich Dad training program, or Rich Dad education program rather, that focuses on the different avenues and ways to invest, whether it be through the stock market or real estate, and then the various ways to invest in real estate. So he has seminars and workshops and on-demand learning and mentoring. I mean, he has a huge program. And I didn't realize at that point that was something that I aspired to, but I knew that the simplicity in how he delivered that content, specifically around the mindset shift, was definitely something that I could take advantage of, that I could execute on. And then from there, I became virtually obsessed.
Yeah, I think that book definitely pushed a lot of entrepreneurs. It was like a light switch turning on, giving our minds a definite shift to the entrepreneurial space. So I can understand that as well. You've started your LLC in 2014, and you're a solopreneur who contracts assistants from time to time. How in your business are you, what is the assistance in your business that you are contracting out?
It depends. As my business grows, and certainly what I offer through my business changes, I again, back to that concept of trading time for money. So I work a full-time job, which requires a lot, right? A majority of my day is spent Monday through Friday working for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in the different administrative tasks associated with what I feel is important to running my business, whether that be marketing efforts, whether that be creative design, creating a logo, creating a training, creating a structure for writing a book as a very relevant example. I think there's a lot of things that I can just say, you know what, I'm going to spend the money to have somebody else do this for me, so that I don't have to spend, X amount of hours trying to get this right, and maybe not delivering a quality product. I want quality the first time around, and, obviously quality that meets somewhere comfortable for my budget. But, I just understand the importance of knowing that I can't do everything. And so I'm very quick to pay somebody to do a better job than I feel like I can do in a shorter period of time than I have to invest into that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then also understanding too, and I think, Rich Dad started this understanding of, when you're working from a business or through a business, that expense is expensible, right? So at the end of the year, when you go to file your taxes, you can say, hey, I spent, X amount of money on a business expense, and it is truly a business expense because it's for your business. And so you kind of play the tax game too, because the difference, and this is from the book as well, the difference between how we are taxed on income as employees and how we are taxed on income as business owners is that the employees get taxed first, and then they get their income. Whereas business owners, they get to, they take their income, they pay for what they need to pay for their business, and then they get taxed afterwards. And I think that's oversimplification, but it's necessary to explain it in that way, because then when you go to file your taxes and you say, okay, I had to travel for my business, I had to buy this for my business, I had to use, my home office for my business, electricity, Wi-Fi, my cell phone, my car, all of these advertising, whatever it is for your business, based off of whatever your income is, you're deducting these from what is considered taxable income. And so at the end of the day, if your taxable income, or rather your income pre-tax and pre-expenses is going to put you in, let's say, a different tax bracket, or you're trying to limit what it is that you have to pay as an entrepreneur or business owner, you'll find expenses, and a good CPA accountant will help you find expenses that you can then take away from your total income, so that you're paying less than not less than what you're required to, but certainly you're not overpaying what it is that you need to pay.
Absolutely. So with the 2 books that you have written, give me the name of your business.
So my business is Unlimited Investment Solutions.
Mm-hmm. And other than being an author of 2 books, 2 published books, what services does your business offer?
Right now it's varied and it's kind of morphing. So lately, I want to say towards the end of 2018, I started speaking publicly on the topics, both mentorship and financial education. And so my business is kind of morphing into a speaking/author business.
Okay.
But in addition to that, I also do financial coaching, which is not to be confused with financial advising, because the advising really kind of tied to a product, or you should buy this stock, or you should buy this security. And the coaching more so in that I'm introducing terms, but also addressing like the mentality as it relates to managing finances. So people who are having regular income, but they're not understanding why they can't budget, or they're not understanding where their money is going, or they're not understanding what this mentality is around how to get away from the poverty mentality or the scarcity mindset. So I like to think of it as kind of like finance therapy, but I don't want to use the word therapy because I'm not licensed. But definitely probably a more relevant example, kind of like personal training, right? You could go online and you can look up how to do XYZ exercise to get XYZ desired end result. Or you can go to a personal trainer who knows these exercises, can show you these exercises, and also hold you accountable to making sure that you're exhibiting the behaviors that you're ultimately looking to, or rather that's necessary for you to get the desired end result. And so I like to think of myself, again, maybe a financial personal trainer.
Okay, perfect example. So you have a nonprofit to help those impacted by homelessness?
Yes, so that's a separate business, and that is called An Extended Hand. It's a nonprofit that we started, I want to say, a year ago. So we're going on 2 years now. And it was started with the original intent of just kind of addressing homelessness. And we learned that homelessness is a huge spectrum. And there's a lot of facets to addressing homelessness, from connecting people with services and housing, and mental illness, and just there's so many different avenues there, and as such there's a lot of competition for resources, especially in the nonprofit world. So we as we learn, we grow, we morph, and we adjust. And so we're taking more of an educational approach to addressing homelessness, definitely focusing on preventative education through financial literacy, through job preparedness, through health and wellness advocacy, and creating awareness in people who may be not aware, right? And helping them not get to a place of homelessness, or helping people who are impacted by homelessness create a plan or enroll in a program that's going to help them get out of the situation they're in. So what I've noticed, and this is not a shot to other organizations, what I noticed is that a lot of organizations that focus on homelessness focus on the housing aspect of it, which is definitely important. But you give somebody a warm bed and a warm meal for, a week, and then you send them on their way, they're going to repeat this cycle. Whereas we want to look at it from a perspective of that whole, if you teach a man to fish, he eats for a lifetime, making sure that they have all the tools that they need to then go out and be in control of their life. And, it's not a losing battle, but it certainly is a battle because you're dealing with a variety of factors, like I said, and a variety of demographics. I mean, and through our research, we've learned that there's a large population of high school students who are considered homeless. There's a large population of college students who choose to be homeless in order to get their education because they have to choose between housing and paying for school. There's a population of homeless veterans who come back from fighting for the country, and then their resources, they just don't know what to do or how to go after those resources, or they don't have the support that they need to connect them to services. People who are impacted by medical, whether it be mental and emotional illness, or just a regular chronic illness that impacts them and they don't have the ability to pay their medical bills. And then everything in between. There's definitely those cases of individuals who abuse drugs and alcohol. And maybe that's what landed them in the place to be homeless, but maybe that's what they've done to cope with being homeless. And so definitely a need to create awareness around what homelessness looks like and the spectrum that exists within homelessness. But for me also, growing up in New York, I had to learn to resensitize myself to homelessness because for a long time, I learned to look through people who are homeless and standing in the corner asking for change or what have you, because it was a common occurrence. And, New Yorkers have this reputation for being rude, but really it's just, New Yorkers are on the go and they just keep going. So there's a lot that goes into it, but there's a lot that I'm passionate about, and there's a lot that my co-founder is passionate about in the space. So I think it makes for a good partnership there, where I get to kind of do my thing from the financial education perspective, and he's been in the nonprofit and human services space for a while, so he gets to kind of live out his passions through those programs as well.
One of the ways that you were impacting homelessness is by owning a multifamily before you turned 30.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us how you did that?
So that's definitely one of my probably, I guess you can call it crowning achievements, right? Because I grew up in an apartment and my mom had Section 8. So we definitely had rent assistance, food stamps, and if I believed that it was possible for me to own a house, I certainly did not believe it was possible to do so at such a young age. I think I kind of bought into this idea of the American dream, white picket fence, the dog, and all of that. And I didn't see that where I grew up. And that's not to say that it didn't exist, because there's a lot of beautiful and very pricey houses in Mount Vernon. But it wasn't something that, I could go to my friend's house and say, oh, this is your house. So it was a distant desire. It's kind of like, oh, one day when I become a doctor, I'll own a house. And so there was no plan. It was just kind of like a desire that was floating around in your mind. Like, yes, this is nice to have, but my reality today is I have an apartment. And so I aspired for that. When I first started speaking, I usually opened up my talks by saying that I aspire to be poor. So I can kind of catch people's attention. And they're like, what? You aspire to be poor? And so I go into explaining that it wasn't that I wanted to be poor, but it was that I wanted to have what it is that I knew. sorry about that. So in having what it is that I knew, that meant, getting an apartment, maybe having Section 8, maybe having food stamps, having a job that allowed for me to live the lifestyle that, I had grown accustomed to or that I felt comfortable with, and then, just grinding it out. I left New York in 2010, in the fall of 2010, with my mom, went down to San Antonio, Texas for 8 months, and then we came back up north to Connecticut in the Hartford area. And I started working in banking. So I was 21 at the time. And the people that I had worked with all had, great credit, their own houses, or were in the process of buying houses. They had the 401k. They were talking about, all things financial that I didn't have previous exposure to. So that kind of rubbed off on me. And I realized that if there are people within my peer group who are capable of doing this, then I should be capable of doing this. And so that's when it became very formulaic. And it's like, okay, 5 years from now, this is what I want to accomplish. Well, how do I accomplish this in 5 years? Well, year 1, I need to do this. Year 2, I need to do this. And so that's when I started to start following disciplines around saving, around budgeting, around building credit, maintaining that credit, growing my credit. And once I got to a place where I felt that I was comfortable income-wise and credit-wise, I decided to, start the process. And again, going back to the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, I understood that there was a difference between buying a house, for the sake of buying a house, right? A single family that's not creating income for me. It's just a liability from a certain perspective. I'm paying into it. Or buying a multifamily house where not only am I getting income from it, but it's helping to offset the cost of the mortgage, and I'm building equity. And, there's a variety of factors that could go into it, depending on, where you buy the house and how much you have to put down, just kind of getting really acquainted with that process. And, time moved very fast. So, the house buying process was stressful in that I had to go and look at so many houses and, learn what to look for and what to avoid, and, deal with the people who are just trying to offload the property. But ultimately, when I made a decision, it was just kind of trusting the process.
I read somewhere where it says the goal in writing your book was to provide perspective and add value to others in a realistic, relatable way when it comes to personal finance. Can you speak about that a little bit?
Sure. And my viewpoint has shifted slightly in my growth and in my we'll call it growth. Okay. But a lot of the people that come to mind when you think of personal finance and leadership in that space. So individuals who are considered quote unquote gurus or masters on the material. You think about Robert Kiyosaki. You think about Grant Cardone. You think about Tony Robbins. And these guys, Dave Ramsey is another one, Susie Orman. And these guys have created success within that space where they're giving out content that people are either swearing by or swearing off, right? It's just like, there's another rich person talking about how to get rich, but having never struggled. And so I think that there is a level of disenchantment on two fronts. One, everybody that I mentioned is not Black, right? So there's no relatability. I think representation matters a lot in this space. And also cultural sensitivity matters a lot in this space too. Whereas if you never experienced what it's like to be in poverty. And that's not to say that everybody who teaches financial education needs to have experienced it, but they should be aware of the conditions and the mentality and the traumas and anxieties that come out of having that be your reality. I realized that there was a gap there. And so I wanted to fill that gap. And I struggled a lot before I put the book out with this idea of credibility. And that who is going to believe or listen to me? I'm not a millionaire. I'm not, this guru in the world of personal finance. I can't stand next to Grant Cardone and Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki and all of these guys. What are my accomplishments? My accomplishments are happening now. But I changed my mindset around that too, and saying that, you know what, I'm in the trenches. Like, my story is relatable. I've accomplished things that, most people aspire to accomplish, and before 30. So I'm not special. I'm not, I didn't get lucky. Like, I worked hard. I created a plan. I followed a model, and I went out and I did it. So I'm sensitive to the audience's understanding that I'm them, and hoping that they can see themselves in me, and inspiring them to, come up with a plan, follow that plan, get out of their own way, educate themselves, and just take action, right? And not make excuses for what are the barriers to success. Definitely understand and acknowledge what are the barriers to success, but figuring out a way around it.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. You see people on television and the people that you've named, and like you said, one, they don't look like you. So you have to be in a different space altogether to believe that you can accomplish what they have accomplished. But you cannot negate the fact that they may have had a come up, or they have had their millions for years and years and years and years. So when someone like you, that comes from your background, that looks like you, is in front of the room, I believe that the majority of the people that you would be speaking to would look like you, and like you said, find something relatable in what you've said. In your book, Financially Irresponsible, you say, I do not accept any liability resulting from a reader's attempt to duplicate, imitate, or otherwise misquote what I discuss here as financial advice. So explain that, because basically you're saying you're not responsible for the outcome of one's actions, positive or negative, after reading your book. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, that disclaimer came out of an attempt to protect myself, in that I think when you start to gain recognition as an authority or a thought leader, particularly when it comes to personal finance, and I'm touching on terms like investing and saving, a lot of people will take it at face value and say, okay, well, this is what he did, so I'm going to duplicate this process. And really, the intent of the book was to focus on changing the mindset, not necessarily directing your behavior. Now, once your mindset changes, certainly your behavior is going to change, but I think you're in the driver's seat for that one. And so what happens a lot of times, and even before I wrote the book, I've been talking about financial education going on 10 years now. People would peg me as this financial advisor. And so if you notice the beginning of our interview, I said, I'm a financial coach, not a financial advisor, or not to be confused as a financial advisor, because I work in financial services. I've been working in financial services for a while. And I understand that there are a lot of regulations around what you as a licensed financial advisor can and can't say, or can and can't recommend. And I don't want the liability that comes with that from a legal ramification perspective, and that somebody can go and say, oh, well, I decided that I wasn't going to save any money and I was going to invest all of my money in the stock market because that's what Rahkim did, and that's what Rahkim got to his success by doing. And at the same time, not taking necessary action to educate themselves on, first of all, what you're investing in, but also assess what the risk is in not saving money in addition to investing. And they end up in a situation where they have to end up liquidating all of their investments, or all of their investments drop in value, and they don't understand that markets cycle, and so you're going to have your extreme highs and you're going to have your extreme lows, and that you kind of have to ride those lows out. There's a lot that comes with what it is that I delivered there, but there is no way for me to kind of funnel, almost 10 years of knowledge and trial and error and going to seminars, workshops, reading books into, less than 200 pages of a book. So I left that out there and saying, own up, like, to your own stuff. Be accountable. This is a starting point. This is to kind of get your wheels turning mentally, and hopefully inspire you to then go out and educate yourself through various means. And at the end of the book, I include a list of some of the books that I've read that have impacted my views on my personal finances, and other resources that may kind of spark some kind of interest in, okay, this is what is considered status quo, but I'm going to be financially irresponsible and break the rules because I feel like this is a hack to that. And also understanding, finally, that what worked for me at 21 may not work for me at 29 or 30. And what works for me at 29 or 30 may not work for me at 40. And so understanding, too, that your relationship with your personal finances is just that. It's a relationship. The needs of the relationship changes. The amount of effort that you have to put into that relationship changes. Your habits and behaviors around what that relationship looks like changes. And so there was a period of time where I could save much more of my income because I didn't have as many obligations as I do now. But now that I have as many obligations as I do, I have to be more strict around budgeting, and that I want to maintain this discipline around paying myself first and paying myself consistently over time.
Hi, this is Sean Henry from ShunHenry'sBecoming. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple, Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no listenership. It's everything you need to make in a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
And not get kind of caught up in this, day-to-day, just kind of throwing money wherever. And so it's hard to articulate that. I think I really reiterated that position maybe 2 or 3 times throughout the book, just so that I can make sure that people kind of got it. Like, don't come to me and say, that you tried to do this and, you lost everything and it's my fault. But at the same time, I don't want to take responsibility for people's success either, because they did the work. I may have sparked an interest or a desire in that. They took on this endeavor, but ultimately, you're doing the work. You deserve full credit for that.
Absolutely. So let me ask you, as a financial coach, if you start a talk with aspiring to be poor, how does that go over with your crowd? In your book, you have a chapter, Aspiring to be Poor. You say, I thought making it was getting food stamps and being approved for Section 8 housing.
Yeah, I've started off that way more frequently than I have it. Kind of now, I'm getting away from it. And I was talking to a mentor recently, and I said, it's almost embarrassing now. And he quickly, said to me, don't be embarrassed about your past. Like, that is what made you you. And I was like, it's not that I'm embarrassed necessarily about my past, but I don't want to keep beating this, dead horse of, I had these poor beginnings and, pulling on people's heartstrings around, what this huge accomplishment is. Because I think at the time of purchasing my house, that was good context leading into it as to why I was so proud of purchasing my house. But as, I kind of turned the corner and certainly people are considering me this guru, which is a title that I don't accept at all. I don't want to keep saying, oh, well, I don't want to keep perpetuating this idea of the poverty mindset or the scarcity mindset. Like, I think it's a good point to refer to, but I don't want that to be my story. There's so much more to me now. And so kind of going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, you look at somebody like Oprah or Grant Cardone. Grant Cardone probably is a more relevant example because I started off not enjoying his content. I did not like what it is that I saw him saying or the attitude that that kind of came from it. And I'll be honest, I didn't consume a lot of his content at the time, but I did at one point see a video that was like 60 seconds. It was on Instagram, and he's talking about how don't buy a single family house or don't buy a house. That's stupid. You want to buy a multi-family house and you want to rent. And I'm like, what? And this is right after I bought my house. So I'm like, this financial gurus out here telling people not to buy houses. How irresponsible is that? To talk to people from my demographic who, first of all, at one point in time, didn't believe it was possible to buy a house. Now you're telling them don't buy a house. And they're holding on to that. And they're running with that and saying, well, I'm going to rent forever because Grant Cardone, who's a financial guru, said it's stupid to buy a house. But the 1 minute video doesn't do justice to his overall message. And so I recently finished a book of his, and I fell in love with him. I fell in love with his success because he talks about his process from being a nobody to being a somebody and the work that he's had to do to get there. And so what I realized is that most people only see through the lens of what your success looks like, which goes back to that point of people being distant and giving advice from an ivory tower. And so I'm turning the corner, I think, in terms of my message because, yes, I want people to be to relate to me and see themselves in me and understand the journey as it happened. But like I said, I'm almost 10 years into this. The next 10 years, when I get to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm 20 years into this, I don't want people to keep saying, oh, well, Rahkim started off as this poor boy, and then people like, oh no, like hopefully my success is magnified, and it does seem like it was almost impossible for me to come from nothing and get to the level of success that I've accomplished. I want to get to a place where my success makes my beginnings unrecognizable.
I completely agree. A lot of times you hear like the Tyler Perrys of the world, and it seems like a lot of successful people that we hear nowadays that look like us, they all started out homeless. And I can say that there was a period in my life where I'm like, should I be homeless? And then all of a sudden greatness is gonna, come upon me. So I do agree that it is important for people to know where you came from. However, I think everyone knows that there was some form of adversity. And I feel like when you harp on, well, I was homeless, or, I grew up in the projects, or it's like, okay, that story, like you said, is continuing to beat a dead horse. And I feel like it is putting in the minds that you're only going to be successful if you have completely hit rock bottom. You talked about in your book that money is a tool that we can use responsibly, but we have to take care of ourselves first. I always use the analogy, put the mask on me first before I can help someone else. And that honestly, I literally took that from flying in an airplane. They always say, in case of an emergency, the mask will drop, put it on you first before helping someone else. And that makes so much sense to me, because how can I help you if I'm struggling? So my question to you is, how do you feel? Because further down in your book, you mentioned about the fear of success, and I definitely want to get into that. And you also mentioned basically when you have reached a level of success, it's almost expected of you from the people around you to reach back, or if you've reached that level of success, then they've reached that level of success through you. Can you speak about that?
Sure. I think that Well, what you said is true, and of course I believe that. I wrote that in my book, but I think there's two things that I'm thinking at the same time, because later in my book I talk about paying it forward and how it's almost an obligation, right? And so that could, from a certain perspective, be a contradiction of thought. And so just to kind of clarify that, that's coming out of my experiences. That's coming out of what I have begun to see in terms of behaviors and expectations of the people around me, but also what I anticipate to see as that continues, as my growth and my success continues. That, you know, people want to associate themselves with your success, whether it be as, you know, somebody that you've known for a long time, or somebody that you're connected to by blood, or somebody that maybe played a very influential role in your life for a specific period of time and is not a part of your life anymore. And I think it's in our nature to be opportunistic, and that's not a negative. That's just, if we see an opportunity to kind of climb up out of wherever we are, then we're going to take advantage of that. But it's important as the individual who is, you know, taking these actions to also understand that that's the nature of people around you, particularly people who have this scarcity mentality or this poverty mindset, right? Where they think that resources are finite, and that if you have it, I can't have it. So in order for me to have it, I need to be as a part of your entourage. I need to be a part of your team. And in that way, that's my ticket to success, because I didn't do it, you did it. But, you know, we've been grinding since we were in diapers together. So, or whatever, you know, whatever analogy you want to use. So, you know, you kind of owe. As a friend, you owe. Or, you know, you're acting like you're too good or you're better than me. And I've heard that from people. I've heard people tell me that I feel like I'm better than them, or that I got lucky, or, you know, that whatever, any kind of excuse that kind of, from my perspective, discredits me and the work that I've done towards accomplishing this. And anybody that knows me personally knows that as long as I've been learning about this, and as long as I've been learning about anything, because I'm just that kind of person, I'm going to share. I'm not one to withhold knowledge, especially if I feel like that knowledge can be impactful for somebody else. I'm a giver by nature, especially when it comes to knowledge. And so when I had to make the decision to kind of slow that up and start monetizing my experience and monetizing my knowledge and education, people are like, oh, well, I can't afford that. And so I have a whole section there where I'm like, people will, they'll have the money for the things that matter to them. And you see these behaviors in and out. And, you know, I study psychology and I study money and I study personal finance. And of course, I'm very aware of the behaviors and habits that people have as it relates to managing not only their money, but somebody else's money. I mean, talk about, you know, the consumer debt crisis in this country and how, you know, you practically have to have a credit card these days, or a credit rather these days, to make any kind of movement. And so it forces a population of unprepared people to take on consumer debt, and sometimes, oftentimes, irresponsibly. It's hard. It's a hard balance to strike. And so, like I said, I'm not a millionaire, and I don't think that $1 million is a lot of money, right? So even when I become a millionaire, that doesn't mean that I can go and throw handfuls of money out to people who need it, just because they're related to me or because they're friends with me. And so it's tough because, you know, I'm a student of capitalism. I don't know that I necessarily agree or disagree with capitalism, but I understand that that's the means by which certainly our country and the world really kind of operates off of. I've adopted capitalistic tendencies as it relates to looking at money, as it relates to finding ways to make money, and hoping to educate other people, particularly Black and other minority people around the fact that, okay, maybe you don't agree with this idea of capitalism, but you have to understand that in order for you to thrive or succeed in this space, that you got to know the rules. Learn the rules, and then if you decide you want to break the rules later, that's on you. But you can't pretend that it doesn't exist or reject it. Reject the system because you don't agree with the system, and then get mad at somebody who is leveraging the system to their benefit for not sharing what it is that they've reaped as rewards from leveraging the system. And I'm not in any way implying that, there's a need to oppress other people or exploit other people, but it's just, like I said, it's a shift in mindset, understanding that, first of all, resources are not finite. They print new money every day, and that, money is being exchanged for goods and services. So find a good or service to provide, and money is going to come to you. Find a couple of goods and services to provide, and now you have multiple streams of income.
Definitely. In the shift in mindset, you speak about generational curses. So it definitely takes a shift in the mindset in order to break those generational curses. The new mentality equals a new approach is something that you speak about in your book. You also speak about the fear of success. Now, I have to tell you, in reading this book, it's definitely not a tearjerker. However, there were some uh, chapters that really spoke to me, and this was one of them: fear of success. And it is truly a real thing. When I realized I experienced fear of success, I was almost ashamed at the thought. You work hard to succeed, so why fear the success, or 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 is it the unknown or the possibility of failure? So that was something that I questioned a whole lot. And then back to what you previously spoke about, is it also the fear that so many people are going to look to you for support? In the Black community, you always see, when someone makes it out, they are almost expected to reach back. You have people who, you have the entertainers or ball players, or they get their first big check, and they're, oh, I bought my mom a house, or I took my mom out the hood, or I took care of my sister, or I did. We always are responsible for reaching back to our family members. What is your take on the fear of success, or explain why that was important to add into your book?
I think my attempt to, if I can use an analogy here, rip the Band-Aid off of certain issues, particularly within the Black community, around the way that we just perceive and interact with one another, particularly, like you said, people who become successful. It forces us to look within, right? And like you said, I I know that there are a lot of talented people sitting on million and billion-dollar ideas, but because of fear and that fear paralysis, they don't take that first step. And that first step is crucial, because then you start to kind of create momentum. And then, as you continue to put one foot in front of the other, more opportunities come to you. And I just see so many people, especially young people, wasting talent because they are afraid of success, and that they don't believe in themselves. They don't believe that they deserve the success. Of course, they want the success, but they don't realize that they're rejecting success because they don't believe that they're worth it, or that they deserve it, or that it can be them. But then also you see older people too, and it's not, fear of success is not specific to any age group, who they feel like, they have this obligation to other people, or that they will have this obligation to other people, or they'll be painted as, this outcast, or, we hear the names, the Uncle Tom, or, bourgeois, or bougie is the common street term, this person's bougie, and they forgot about who they were. And you see in TV depictions of people who are very extravagant and lavish in their exterior, but they're lonely. They're made fun of. They're like the black sheep of the family. And in my journey, I've had to, not because my family has done this to me, but because I've done it to myself, I've had to reflect on some of the decisions that I've made and that I continue to make as it relates to my life as a whole and the trajectory that I want to take towards being successful, but specifically money, because, and Grant Cardone says this in his book that I just finished. First, you're going to be ridiculed and criticized, and then later you become admired. There comes the admiration. And so when I left New York in 2010, that was not a popular decision. I left everything and everyone that I knew but my mom because I was traveling with her. And then when we moved back up to Connecticut, I was still, roughly 2 hours away from, the core nucleus of family that I had grown up with. And so when I first got here, it wasn't, I didn't have reliable transportation. I wasn't driving. I grew up in New York. I walked everywhere. Took public transportation. And then once I started driving, it was like, oh, I'm going to go to New York as frequently as I can. But that's not sustainable either. You start to build a life, and you start to build a life around where you are, whether that be socially, whether that be from a work perspective, whether that be from a side hustle and building your business perspective. And so it's not convenient always for me to jump in my car and drive 2 hours down in New York just to turn around and drive 2 hours back. And so I think a lot of people started to take that personally in the beginning. Like, oh, he's not about family. Or they, on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, said, oh, you know what? I understand he's building, but still, he's not making time for family. And so I had to kind of wrestle too, because I did not want my family to feel like I don't care about them, or that I don't love them, or that I don't want to be around them. But I'm also very much focused on that concept that we talked about, trading my time for money, or just understanding the value of my time. And so if I have to, fill up, drive down 2 hours, okay, that's 2 hours on my day that I don't have, get down there, hang out, socialize, whatever, turn around, drive 2 hours back up. Okay, that's 4 hours on my day now that I've been on the road. That's a half tank gas, and what did I accomplish? I'm saying? We're in an environment where we're all feeling good and hanging out and doing family things together, but who's putting the most effort into this? And so I had to really kind of abandon what these traditional concepts of expectations are, or what is loyalty, or how you define showing love or showing respect, and really just kind of focus on me. And that's the only way that I've been able to build to the point that I've been able to build. Because my family wasn't contributing to my knowledge around finances. My family wasn't contributing to my how I built wealth and practices that I exhibit. Like, all of those things are things that I've learned. And to be very honest, in going down and spending my time with family, and I love this, but it's a truth that I need to point out. I'm the one who's giving that, those things. I'm teaching about building wealth. I'm teaching about my process. I'm teaching about things that I've learned. So now I'm giving on two fronts. I'm giving of my time. I'm giving of my energy. I'm giving of my knowledge. And because it's family, what's the expectation? I'm going to give it for free. I'm not going to pay, Lil Rahkim for what it is that he's learned. And then you start to see the discrediting happen, right? Oh, you learned that by accident, or you learned that by osmosis, or you learned that because you work in the field. You should share the knowledge that you have. You should pay it forward. And these are not things that I've heard, but these are things that I'm anticipating. And so, when my family listens to this, because I'm sure somebody will, I don't want them to take it personally and say, oh, wow, like, he really feels that way about us. But I do want them to understand too, like, there's certain sacrifices that I've had to make. And some of those sacrifices haven't felt good to me. I had a family member reach out to me in a very indirect way. So they didn't ask me for money directly, but they created an environment or an atmosphere that if you read into it, you understood that there was a request for money being made. And instead of giving the money, I sent them a link to an app that I use where if they sign up, we both get a free stock share. And so in my way, that was indirectly teaching them a lesson, right? Here, you get exposure and access to understanding what investing in the stock market is. You get a stock free to you that is worth something. And then you can decide what you want to do with that stock. If you want to liquidate and sell it, okay, well, that's your money. If you want to hold on to it and build on it, well, that's the smarter choice. And this family member just lashed out at me. Like, that didn't help. And, going into this whole thing, like, basically condemning me and cursing me. And I was like, you didn't even ask me for anything. Like, sure, you created an environment where I very clearly understood what it was that you were asking for. But literally, the words did not come out of your mouth saying, I need this from you, or I want this from you. I had to assume. And so then it's just like, wow, like, your expectations is, you're going to put your problems on the table and I'm going to solve them for you. That's not what I'm about. So I think to this day, I still struggle with elements of being fearful of success. Certainly not as much because I've just kind of got into my own groove and I think I've made it clear so people don't bother me so much. But I think as the different levels are attained in terms of what is considered successful in the eyes of, the people around me, that the demands will become more and more. You know what I'm saying? If I go out and it becomes known that I have, 5 income producing multifamily properties, right? I have 10 doors. And of course I'm drawing income from this because why wouldn't I? And I'm like, oh, he makes enough money that he doesn't have to work. He has money to give it to us. No, that's not what that means. And so you just kind of have to develop a thicker skin is really the short answer to that long answer I gave.
Oh no, I definitely appreciate that and can very much so relate. There's plenty of times where it's assumed, like you just said, oh, well, in my case, like you said, well, you have multiple real estate deals, or you drive this, or you never look like you're hurting for money, so therefore you have money to offer. But what people don't realize is the quote unquote liability. Some of them are liabilities, some of them are assets. If they're producing income, they cost money, in order to perform the way that you wanted them to perform. But people don't see that. So it's definitely a mindset shift, that you have to teach people. And speaking of that mindset shift, I spent a lot of time in the beginning years of being an entrepreneur, buying into a lot of multi-level marketing companies. There's 2 things that I want to touch on that you spoke about. Well, let me back up because I like this one. In the self-fulfilling prophecies, so it's 2 things I'm going to mention here. The self-fulfilling prophecies, you spoke about doing what others expect of you. You just mentioned that, this person created a space where it was safe to assume that they were asking for money without asking for money. And you say, if you're constantly told that you're not going to be enough, be anything, achieve anything, you end up in that position. This spoke to me very deeply, because I grew up being told I was not good enough, from my looks to my talents or lack thereof. I vividly remember at age 11, I overheard someone refer to me as a brick wall that needed to be broken down and built back up. And ironically, I wasn't offended for myself rather than for my mother, who, like your parents, my mother was a teenage mom and essentially had been raising me alone. So I would hear negative talk like this all the way through high school. I was told she's going to be a teenage mom, she's not going to graduate, even though I didn't show any activity to prove either one right. And this negative talk over me or over my life was told all the way up into class day of my high school, when the Army was presenting me with a $40,000 check for education. So so all my life, I've literally been proving people wrong. So I think that also gets into that self-talk, that people have, the self-doubt, that starts to seep in, the things that you heard as a kid or you saw other people doing, and you're saying, oh, I can't be that way. You speak about people who make more money, or they're making money and they avoid finding ways to increase their income to maintain programs or benefits that they're already receiving, like let's say Social Security. So as I had to reteach myself, or literally look in the mirror and tell myself, okay, you're beautiful, you're talented, you have all of these things to offer, and kind of build a wall, impenetrable wall to all the negative talk. When I got into multi-level marketing, I would be faced with the people who, again, were on these assistance, getting Social Security or other kind of government assistance programs. And they literally would say, I don't want to lose my Social Security, so no, I can't partner with you. I don't want to lose my benefits. And so to me, that reminds me of what you just spoke about with that family member. You gave them an opportunity to better themselves, but they didn't want that. They wanted you to hand them the hand them the money or take care of their issue. So when you speak about the self-fulfilling prophecies, self-talk or self-motivation is very important in changing the mindset. Is that something that you agree with?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I did a podcast recently with someone, I don't remember which podcast it was, but I talked about how my parents and my grandfather, as I mentioned earlier, poured so much into me by way of self-esteem, and I struggled with self-esteem growing up, which is just kind of ironic. And I realize now in hindsight that I struggled with self-esteem because I was different, and I didn't realize that I was different. I was different only because of the way that I perceived the world and interacted with the world and other people. So I didn't feel quote unquote cool, or I didn't feel quote unquote whatever the word that you want to use, but I just didn't feel a part of the crowd. Like I wasn't popular growing up. I kind of stayed to myself. I was very analytical. I was very much introverted, and I didn't develop the qualities that most people associate with being an extrovert until later in life, when I realized the value. And so because of that, I had low self-esteem. I didn't believe in myself from the perspective of, I guess, what is considered social capital. But I did not believe in myself in terms of being determined to accomplish something. If I wanted something, I figured out how to get it. And I carry that with me into this day. There is no cap to what success looks like for me. If I decide one day that this is something that I want to do, then I work tirelessly in trying to make that happen. And I said in this interview that I wasn't even allowed to be around people who would make me feel like I couldn't accomplish something. I think that's powerful. My parents shielded me from influences that would otherwise kind of steal my light. And in that, I was able to continue to, sometimes it was positive, sometimes it was negative, but stay in my own head about what success looked like and how to get there, because nobody told me that I couldn't do it or that I wouldn't be able to do that. Now, on the flip side, as a young Black male growing up in, today, and well, at the time, today's society, and continuing to grow up in today's society, there's structures that absolutely exist that will challenge you and will challenge, your value and, what success looks like or can look like for you. And so, like you, I think I spent a lot of time in my life proving people wrong, or surprising people, because they're just looking at me. I mean, my parents tell me stories about how, when I was in elementary school, the school wanted to put me in a special education program because they thought that I wasn't producing. And then I go take a state exam and I score in the 10th percentile or whatever, the highest percentile, not of the school, but of the county. And they're like, what? And, my dad tells me with pride that he was like, yeah, he's supposed to go to special education. And, at this point in time, I think, this was certainly at the beginning stages of, what has become the ADD or the ADHD kind of trend, right? Where you get a kid who's not paying attention, they're not sitting still in class, and, they're bored, for lack of a better, terminology, or maybe that's the perfect terminology. They're not being challenged, they're not being stimulated, and so they're not paying attention, or they're just not engaging. And, they don't have the voice to say, like, hey, you're not challenging me. And so they're just sitting there, and then they get penalized for that, especially young, gifted, quote-unquote minority children. And I'll never forget this. There was a math class. I was in elementary school, but towards the end of elementary school, so maybe like 5th grade or so. And there was a math class that was like the highest math class. And I'm standing in line outside the math class, waiting for the teacher to open the door. And there was this white kid standing in front of me. He turns around, he looks at me in my face, and he says, "You don't belong in this class." And I didn't know how to respond to that. And I was like, well, why am I here?
Wow.
But he turned around, he looked at me straight in my face, and without hesitation said that to me, and I believed him. That was the thing that stands out to me about that moment. I believed him because I did struggle with coming to the conclusion. I got to the answers, but it took me longer to come to the answers. But I was still keeping up with the rest of them. It took me a little bit longer to get to the answers.
Wow.
And because they said that to me, I for a second, I believed them. And of course, I had to come up with a response because, that's what kids do. But I was sitting there like, damn, he's telling me I don't belong in this class. What does it have to do with him? What does it have to do with you? And I've always excelled in school. Always. I mean, I didn't fail my first class until I got to high school. And that was just because I literally had to work to not pass that class. And I didn't realize it at the time because I was, 16, 17 years old, and I thought I knew everything. But I went to class every day, and I took out my notebook, I wrote my name, and then I zoned out for the rest of the class.
I'm saying, what made you believe? When did you come to the realization that yes, I do belong here?
I think that there's a common, I refer to my grandfather all the time. He always, my whole life, told me I was a genius. Always, my whole life. So like I said, when he was very intentional, him and my parents were very intentional in filling us up with esteem, with self-esteem, and realizing, our greatness. Probably over-filled us with esteem, and that we had to kind of learn through interacting with other people how to kind of take it down a notch.
You had the Kanye effect, huh?
I'm going, so this is not a pat on the back to me by any means, but when I was a junior in high school, I took the PSAT. And so, it was a practice exam for the SAT. I had no SAT prep, and I scored in one of the highest percentiles on the English and writing portion of the exam. None of my teachers knew that I had possessed that ability until they got the results back. And then they started going crazy, like, you got this score, and, what are you doing outside of school? And we need to give you these reasons. Because to them, it was an accolade that I was able to achieve success at that level. But to me, it was just me doing what was normal. I didn't have any extra resources. And so now I'm competing against kids who have extra resources and still beating. That's impressive. From their perspective, that's impressive.
That seems like a trait that you continue to possess as you gotten older. In your book, you spoke about buying furniture and buying your car, and people underestimated you until you pulled out your Amex, and then now all of a sudden, they're paying more attention to you.
Yeah.
And listen, I there's so many parallels with your story. It's so funny, just like you said with your Kanye effect, is what we're gonna call it during this interview. It was the same with me. I drove a Toyota Camry for the longest time. I had my dream car was a Mercedes-Benz CLS 550, and once I decided that I was going to get the car, it took me 10 years to actually get it, from the time I saw it to the time I actually got it. And I remember pulling up to my friend's shop, and his brother said, "Oh, Sean thinks she's, all that now that she has that Mercedes." And my friend, without even hesitating, said, "Oh no, she thought that in the Camry." But you had your family that was constantly affirming your greatness, and your grandfather calling you a genius. And as a young Black boy, I think that is very important for us to continue to speak life into our young men, because as you grow up as a Black man, you have almost a target on your back now, definitely in this day and age, a target on your back just because someone else understands your greatness. So I really applaud you on those things. I want to talk about your property. You stated in your book that through your discipline, so you are practicing what you preach. Through your discipline, you saved $12,000 for your down payment for your house, and then you lost it 2 years before you ended up buying the house. So the readers can definitely go in and purchase your book to find out more of the background with that. But what I want to ask you is, how did you get it back?
It's funny. I just have to say, before I answer the question, kind of reflecting back on some of the things that I've accomplished over time, and certainly adversity, that I look back on those experiences fondly now, because it's like, man, like that I was resilient enough to get over that. But the answer to your question is, I started over, and I'll go further to say that I have like this ongoing joke with my mom, because whenever like the Powerball or lottery hits like a really big, like crazy, insane number, she's like, "Oh, we gotta go play. We gotta go, pick some numbers." And I'm like, "Yeah, we could do that, but that's not how I'm supposed to build wealth." And I think that that's powerful in that, first of all, I'm already claiming that I'm going to build wealth. But secondly, in that, I don't believe that that's the way that I'm going to build wealth, simply because I believe that once wealth is attained for me, wealth is not going to leave me. And that's a mentality thing first, but then, a physical thing secondly, because just like that example, because I learned how to build up to that point, even in losing it all, I didn't lose the knowledge of. And so, I went back to the drawing board. I did exactly what I did all over again, but I learned the second time around. And what I learned the second time around is I didn't need as much money as I had to put a down payment on a house. Because at the time, I didn't know anything about an FHA loan. I didn't know that I only had to put 3.5% down. I thought I had to put down 20%. And that was, that was me buying my house. So, as I went back to the drawing board and started to, again, reestablish disciplines around saving, consistently paying myself first, and working towards ultimately what would be my goal. Sure, I missed my target date by a year, but I was still in the process of buying or actively looking within that time frame. And so then, of course, as a homeowner, you have to do your due diligence. I could have had a house at 25, but there were certain deals that I was involved in that didn't work out. You get almost to the finish line and then something, goes awry. So I ended up buying my house the next year, which, I missed my target by a year, but I still hit my target. And it's certainly still an accomplishment to achieve before 30.
Absolutely. And not only did you reach your target, you reached it with knowledge. So that was a win-win, overall.
Absolutely.
You speak about this common disease in your book that many suffer from. You call it excuse-itis. Can you elaborate more on the disease and the cure, if there is one?
Yes. So you made a point earlier about speaking life into youth, and that resonated with me. Like, my heart fluttered when you said it, because it's something that I'm passionate about. And again, my first book is on mentoring, and it's on mentoring because mentoring is something that I'm passionate about. It's something that I live and breathe. Everything that I write, I live and breathe. It's easier in our minds to self-sabotage than it is to create success. When the reality of the situation is that it requires the same amount of energy to come up with an excuse about why you can't do something than to just do it. And so, Grant Cardone talks about it in this book that I just finished of his, the 10X rule. He says there's 4 degrees of action. And I wish that I had finished his book before I wrote mine, because I would have included it. But the first degree of action is to do nothing. And he says that it takes the same amount of energy to do nothing as it does to do something. And the second degree of action is to retreat. So now you're putting energy into avoiding or retreating from whatever it is that you need to get in front of. And I think that's where excuse-itis falls into. The third degree of action is status quo. And I'm paraphrasing, so it's not the word that he used, but basically you're doing what everybody else is doing that makes your effort normal or the same as everybody else. And he describes this degree of action as being the most dangerous, because once you get to that space where you're doing what everybody else is doing, you lose this hunger to continue moving forward. And then he describes the fourth degree of action as massive action, taking massive action. So putting your all into whatever it is that you're working towards. And so I've, since reading the book, and even before reading the book and having the words to describe it, I've always taken massive action. Don't put my energy into it, then I'm going to put my energy into it, and I'm going to make this happen. When I was in high school, I wrestled, and my wrestling coach used to say, the time you spend doing it wrong is time that you could spend doing it right. And I carry that life lesson with me. I carry that life lesson with me to this day, in that I don't really tolerate excuses for the people that I'm mentoring. I don't really create excuses for myself. Either I want to do it or I don't want to do it, and I acknowledge that. And if I want to do it and I don't do it, then that's my fault. I'm taking ownership, because I wanted to do it and I know what I'm capable of. I've proven myself multiple times over and over again that if I want to do it, I can do it. So what's stopping you from success? You're being lazy. And that's the mentality that I have as it relates to coaching other people or influencing other people, whether it's in a formal or informal setting. You're creating excuses for why you're not successful, or you're allowing the creation of excuses to take place of you creating actions around navigating through those structures or those obstacles that are holding you back. And so it really kind of speaks to this concept of ownership and accountability to yourself. And really the only the only cure, I guess you can say, to that is, finding a way to be accountable. And whether that means, working with a coach or a mentor or, somebody to hold you accountable, or, just finding it within yourself that, this is what I want to accomplish.
This book was, first of all, your story is just amazing to me in itself. I'm glued to this interview, and I hope our listeners will be as well and appreciate what you have to offer. But if not, I do for sure. But you talked about your first time purchasing stock. So this is something that I want to talk about, because this is not an area that I am very strong in. I've purchased stock outside of or within a mutual fund. I have, a retirement fund through my job. Purchasing stock outside of a mutual fund is something that I would like to do, but have little knowledge on how to do it. And people will say, oh, you just buy stock, but they don't tell you really how to do it. So the how has somewhat paralyzed me at this point. You speak about brokerage accounts. Can you speak about the process of purchasing stock in layman's terms? So in the simplest terms for beginners such as myself. So basically, how to choose and brokerage accounts, and how to choose stocks to purchase.
Sure. So I think today, with the current environment, it's easier than ever to get involved with stock investing. I think Cash App even allows for you to invest in the stock market. Then you have your, Robin Hoods and your, what are the other ones? They're just like these apps that exist on your phone, and you link it to your bank account and you send money there, and they allow for you to purchase either fractional shares or whole shares of stock associated with a company, depending on what its value is and how much money you put into it. But the way that I did it, I went to a traditional brokerage. So at the time, I was working for a bank, and it was an associated brokerage. And within the relationship of my employment, I was able to get certain products for free. So for me, I didn't have to worry about an investment minimum, or at the time there was commissions for trades, worrying about the commissions fees for certain instrument types, whether it was a mutual fund or a stock or a bond. I mean, those all exist too. And I guess my advice, and it's very simplistic advice, but is to understand what it is that you're investing in. Let me take a step back. Before you even start investing, I think it's important to understand what your risk tolerance is. And so when you sit with a financial advisor, any good financial advisor should go over what that means. And that simply means how tolerant are you of losing the money that you put into this investment? Because a lot of people go into stock investing looking for this get rich quick to occur, where they dump a ton of money into a very low valued stock, and they hope that one day it just pops. And that certainly does happen in some instances, but more likely than not, it doesn't happen. And so people lose money when the stock goes down, and when the stock goes down and they lose money, they panic and they start selling it off, and then they take a loss, and it just becomes this whole traumatizing experience. So first, understand what your risk tolerance is, and understand the money that you put into the stock market can lose value, and sometimes will lose value. Also, understanding what it is that you're investing in. So I think a lot of people, when it comes to investing in the stock market, immediately they want to go into tech, because tech has made a lot of people money. Whether it was around the time of the .com boom, or you're looking at Amazon, and what Amazon stock looks like today versus what Amazon stock looked like when it first came out, or a favorite of mine, Apple, and what Apple stock looks like today versus the time that I started investing in it. And you're like, wow, like there's so much growth potential in these companies. But then you also look at companies like, you know, Blockbuster, right, who's no longer here, or other retail places that may not exist anymore. And it's just like, well, you know, what happens to all my shares? And you can lose money. I've lost money. I've lost a lot of money investing in the stock market. But I've learned in the process. And so you just kind of have to learn. You have to learn how to take a hit, figuratively, and I guess literally too, from a certain perspective, when it comes to investing in the stock market, where it's like you're not refinancing your house and throwing all the equity that you have into the stock market. And some people do blindly, even with the 401ks. They're throwing, you know, a large portion of their income into the 401k. They're investing into products that they don't understand. These products either underperform or there's a market correction, and then they lose a lot of value, and it's just like, oh, well, I put all this money into the market and I lost it. And, you know, now I don't have any money. So understand the risk tolerance, one. Two, understand the product that you're investing in. Just kind of doing research on how's it performing. Are you a consumer of that product? Are other people a consumer of that product? You know, where is it in terms of popularity? Like I said, a favorite stock of mine is Apple. And I have Apple everything. I have the watch, I have the Mac, I have the iPad, I have 2 iPads, I have a phone. So I'm a really big Apple fan. I believe in Apple as a company, but I also kind of understand some of Apple's financials. And so I think that would lead me into my next kind of basic piece of advice is just, you know, start getting comfortable understanding the financials of the company. So looking definitely at the long term, I think anybody can make money and build wealth through investing in the stock market, so long as the economic structure and integrity of this country is maintained. But they just have to be willing to play the long game. And so it's not going to be overnight. It's not going to be a month, 6 months, a year. I've been holding Apple since, I want to say, 2017. I could be wrong. But you know, that it's 2020 now, and I've been buying consistently over time. So what I've seen as a gain in terms of holding that stock has been substantial for me. And by no means do I have like 1 million shares of Apple, but for me, it's substantial in that my initial investment has seen growth over that period of time because the value of the stock has seen growth.
Yeah, definitely. I'm a Droid user, but my son is definitely Apple, so we go back and forth. But yeah, Apple has sustained, unlike no other. So I definitely agree with that. And one thing that was told to me before about purchasing stock is purchase in companies that you use. You know, so.
Right.
So for you to purchase Apple stock and you have everything Apple, that I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And just that advice alone in purchasing something that you use, at the bare minimum, you're a fan of that brand. So, you know, you kind of feel like, okay, I'm a fan of the brand. I'm kind of getting my money back a little bit, you know, when I purchase stuff. Let's talk a little bit about legacy building as we begin to wrap up our interview. You have 2 published books, Mentorship, The Playbook, and Financially Irresponsible, which we've definitely talked a lot about. Amazing book. Let me just say that. I look forward to writing the review in Amazon, where people can purchase this book, Financially Irresponsible, as well as Mentorship, The Playbook. What is the impact that you're hoping to achieve through your business, through your legacy?
Inspiration. That's the boiled down essence of everything that I do. I hope to inspire people to believe that what they want they can achieve, or I describe it as their infinite potential. In the book, I describe it as the impossibility of impossibility. And I think to a degree I've been successful in that. Most people don't put out 2 books in 2 years. I've done a lot of things in those 2 years as well. I mean, I delivered a TED Talk in December on financial empowerment. I started a nonprofit in 2018. And, my business has shifted and grown. I've been featured in 2 magazines so far. And my platform is expanding. And that's really kind of like my short-term goal. I want to get my content in front of as many people as possible so that, I can provide value, because I know that there is value to provide. And I'm learning through this process that it is also a long game, right? Like, my success definitely did not occur overnight. And for me to move on to the next level of success, it's not going to occur overnight either. But I have a better sense of drive and direction and a formula or pathway to success today than I did 10 years ago. And I think as the years go by and I continue to be consistent in delivering content for public consumption that can make a difference in people's lives, that success will look different for me 10 years from now and in the future as well. But both books that I wrote, Mentorship, the Playbook, and Financially Irresponsible, speak to similar but different audiences, afflicted by a lot of the same, what do I want to call it? Environmental factors and influences, right? You have poverty, you have crime, you have broken families, you have a demographic of people who are in this country, the descendants and current subjects of abuse and racism, whether it be direct or indirect, who is fighting at a deficit. And so I think the inspiration piece is so huge, because we have talented people. Like I said, people who are sitting on, $1 million plus ideas, who by circumstance feel forced into a life of crime or poverty or what is considered non-traditional means of success, because they don't know any better. They don't believe in themselves. They don't have the self-esteem. I turned 30 this year, and I talk to my dad every so often. We talk about, especially on my birthday, what accomplishment looks like for him, having been able to see me reach 30. And he says to me frequently, Rahkim, there was a period of time in my life that I didn't think that I was going to be able to make it to 30 myself. And that was the reality of his life. And so for him to see me reach 30 is like a proud accomplishment for him, because he's like, well, I made it and I did a good job. And, like I said, he was a teenager when I was born. I could not imagine being 17, 18 years old today, having a kid and being able to accomplish the things that I've been able to accomplish. It's not to say that it's not possible, but that's my life. Like, I have so much going on in terms of what I'm dedicating my time to, that I don't know that I could, hold down a full-time job and be a parent full-time and deliver, what it is that I'm delivering. And certainly it's a part of my goal to be able to, like you said, in the vein of legacy building, pass on what it is that I've created, or at least have my legacy benefit from what it is that I've created perpetually into the future. But also, like you said earlier, I can't help somebody if I'm not already helped myself. And so I think my approach has been, and it's been my approach, and so other people have taken others, but my approach has been to create a foundation for myself and build off of that foundation so that it can sustain me and my heirs, whatever that look like. If I have 1 kid, if I have 5 kids, if I have 20 kids, and I don't plan on having 20 kids.
Listen, that Apple stock better really produce you having 20 kids.
been recited to me growing up. And the quote was, to cultivate a man is to cultivate an individual, but to cultivate a woman is to cultivate a nation. And I had heard it a million times growing up, and I'm like, all right, like, yeah, my grandfather was really good for graphics. I didn't understand it until, now, later in life. Like I said, I'm approaching 30, and so certainly I'm thinking about what it looks like to settle down. And that means giving up an element of control of my life, right? That means, sharing in not only my success or what it is that I've created from a wealth perspective, but being able to pour what it is that I've learned into the individual that's going to carry my children, so that my children benefit, or my nation benefits from what it is that I've had to learn. And I don't want to do it the way my parents did. I don't want to have to be growing up with my children. As far as having to navigate through life in that decade, but I think there's still a lot for me to learn, and there's still a lot for me to accomplish. And when I have children, I want to give them everything. I want to give them the world. I don't want there to be any excuse or barrier to their success in whatever it is that they choose to do, whether that looks like financial, whether that looks like attention and love, so my time, whether that looks like being able to have their own business or choose their own path. Ideally, I would not want my children to have to work for anybody ever, and to pour into them the same esteem that my grandfather and my parents poured into me. So they walk around this planet believing that they can have and create anything that they want to create. And I think it's one thing to say that to somebody, but it's a completely different situation to show that to somebody. And we see that with I think I don't think, because I've definitely used this term, but there's a term that is common in the street, like the trust fund babies, or the kids that are born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and we talk about it in a way that is demeaning or negative, because we don't get to partake in that experience often. But is there really something bad with a kid growing up with a trust fund, or with a kid growing up with a silver spoon? I mean, the attitude associated, the arrogance, and the entitlement associated, I think people speak more to than anything else. But is that insult coming out of a place of disdain for the attitude, or is it coming out of a place of disdain for the fact that we don't have it? I would love for my children to quote unquote be born with a silver spoon in their mouth and have a trust fund, and that they can walk around without they truly won't understand what it means to want, or what it means to not be able to pursue something that they view as a passion because dad doesn't have the money to do it.
I completely agree. That was something I feel like every generation should move the next one further. Are entrepreneurs born, or are they made? What's your opinion or your take on that?
I really struggle with this question, but I think that it's a combination of both. I think at first we have to define what is entrepreneurship. What does that look like for you? And I think from there you can then answer the question. So, as an entrepreneur, you're a self-starter. In my opinion, as an entrepreneur, you're a self-starter, you're a self-provider. You're taking really control of your own destiny, particularly financially, into your own hands. And I think everything that we touched on today leads up to what that looks like from a success perspective, right? Having the accountability, having that thick skin, having the self-esteem and the belief in yourself that you can do it. All of those factors, I think, are foundational to what makes an entrepreneur successful. And so when I say that entrepreneurs are made, what I mean is that those traits, I think in our most perfect nature, those traits come natural to us. So when you look at a hunter-gatherer society, right, where they say that we come from, You only eat what you kill, or you eat what you cultivate. And so you're not, like today, you're not just kind of sitting around living a sedentary lifestyle waiting for things to be delivered to you. And that's not to take away from or discredit the work that non-entrepreneurs do. Some people don't feel like entrepreneurship is for everyone. And some people certainly don't want to live that lifestyle. But I think at the root of it all, having the ability and the desire to go out and eat what you kill or eat what you cultivate is something that is innate and natural to us as human beings. The other side to it, though, in terms of entrepreneurs being made, because of the way that society is, particularly, our society in this country and really kind of globally, because, the internet and, systems and structures that exist from government and on down, that nature that we have is beat out of us or molded out of us. And so we go through socialization with public education. And we go through further socialization by working jobs or working for somebody else. And so, of course, to exist in these structures, you have to follow the rules. And so they're telling you, whoever the governing body of whatever organization it is, what it is that you can and can't do, what it is that you can and can't say, how it is you show up, what you wear, everything. They're dictating, what your lifestyle looks like. And then beyond that, you have society and the media telling you what you should, what you should say, what you should wear, what you can't say, what you can't wear, what you can and can't do, what's lawful, what's not lawful. And I think as civilization and societies have become more and more sophisticated and more complex, that it has taken away from what is our nature. And so in that way, you have to kind of reprogram yourself to get in touch with those elements of, your true nature, which I guess some people will consider feral. But I think especially Black people, we don't come from a lack of civilization. We don't come from feral. We come from, civilization as the fathers and mothers of civilization. And so when you talk about going back to what is our nature, I think our nature is to create. Our nature is to rule. Our nature is to go out and manifest what is our destiny. And I think this is true of human beings as a whole, but I'm focusing in on Black people in particular, particularly Black people as African descendants, because so much of our nature has been forgotten through the transatlantic slave trade and slavery and Jim Crow and everything that follows that. And I referenced several times in my book this book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, which I felt was necessary because there's an element of that PTSD that Dr. DeGroy talks about that impacts our relationship with money in society as a whole as well, and entrepreneurship, of course, because back to my grandfather's genius, we don't have that element of esteem being poured into us. And so, of course, we don't believe that we're capable of creating or ruling or manifesting or bringing home. So we have to go and we have to fight for the scraps that are left for us. I think that entrepreneurship is definitely it's a challenge of yourself to get in tune with yourself, to make things happen for yourself, sometimes by yourself. And going back to what I referred to earlier with Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, understanding too within the capitalist structure of our society that the self-employed business owner is not going to fare as well as the owner of systems on the right side of the quadrant, in that we're not trading much time for money anymore. We're just collecting the paycheck because we've put a system in place that's going to continue to push out passive income for us. I said it's always been impressed upon me that I should do for self. I should start my own business. That I was a genius, and my grandfather frequently compared us to other geniuses, introduced us to names like, Imhotep and, just, he's Imhotep really. I want to spend some time on him for a second. I don't know if you're familiar with Imhotep, but he was recorded as the first recorded Renaissance man. He was in Egypt, who was the creator of the Step Pyramid. And he was a doctor. I believe he was a physicist. He was an advisor. I mean, he did everything. And the way that we're taught in today's society says that we have to specialize in one area. And that, how could you be a doctor and be a lawyer and be an architect at the same time? Right? And so when my grandfather is introducing this man and his accomplishments to a young me, right, and saying that you could do anything and everything that you want to accomplish, there's no limit to what it is that you can accomplish because somebody else who looked like you did it before, how powerful that is and how lasting that is. And it wasn't a one-time conversation. This was something that was, beat into my head over the period of years that I was asked to then recite back in the company of many other people. But this example is the example that stands out to me that I want to spend a little bit of time on. And so, when you talk about entrepreneurship, like, man, that's the small fry of the equation. Like, entrepreneurship is cool, yeah. That's gonna allow me to live the lifestyle that I want to at some point, and that I don't have to worry about, running on this hamster wheel associated with the rat race. But that, my ambitions are so much greater in being able to impact, laterally the lives of people that I encounter while I'm here, but the lives of people that, might hear about me or encounter my stuff when I'm long gone.
In our last segment, Growing Our Tribe, we shout out another small Black-owned business as well as a book that has helped us in growing our minds, which in turn grows our business.
But his name is John Saunders. So I hope that he gets a chance to listen to this and hear the shout out. So he specializes in a lot of web marketing, web design. He puts out a lot of good content on a regular basis for free on social media. And he is also it's 54 Digital. And he's available on Instagram at the number 5, the word 4, and the word digital, all as one handle. But he also is the founder of Black Wallet, which is another awesome page on Instagram that pushes out content specific to financial literacy, entrepreneurship, investing. And the reason why I'm shouting him out is because I want to kind of kill two birds with one stone. He put out a book that I read before I wrote mine, in the process of writing mine, specific to financial literacy, called A Step-by-Step Guide to Building Wealth from $1, the Black Wealth Masterclass. It's a short read. It's not expensive. I think I read the book in a day, maybe went into 2 days because I just had to get up and start doing stuff. But similar to my book, he introduces the audience to different products and mentalities around managing wealth, specific to Black wealth. And actually, I had heard about him because I saw an advertisement for his book. So I went, checked out the book. I bought the book. I connected with him on social media. We talk whenever we need to. Like, he's very approachable. I've reached out to him several times. I sent him a copy of my book. He's endorsed it on social media as well. But really good guy, doing big things as an entrepreneur, and constantly providing value for the people that subscribe to him in his various channels. So again, John Saunders is his name. And then again, he's the founder of Black Wallet, which is at Black Wallet on Instagram. And He's the founder of 5-4 Digital, which is the number 5, the word 4, and digital. And that is also on Instagram.
Well, thank you for that. I really, really do appreciate you taking the time, Rahkim, to speak with me. You have poured so much into me. Your book has definitely been just a wealth of knowledge. I think this is the first financial book that I've read that I cried. I was actually having lunch and I was reading it and just thinking about, like I said, some things in my past, because you do talk a lot about mindset. I was getting emotional and I'm like, this is a financial book. Why are you getting emotional? But I definitely want our readers to, or excuse me, not our readers, our listeners to get both of your books. The first one is Mentorship, the Playbook, and the second one is Financially Irresponsible, both by Rahkim Sabree. Let them know where they can follow you.
So I made it very easy for everybody. My website is my name, so it's RahkimSabree.com. And my Instagram and Twitter handles are my name as well, Rahkim Sabree. So it's RahkimSabree, 2 E's, Instagram and Twitter. And you can find me there.
Okay, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you spending your time with us, and look forward to following you on Instagram, seeing how you progress, and possibly having you back on as a follow-up to this. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Bye-bye. Poverty is not a reflection of wealth or lack of wealth, but more so referring to what your state of being is, which could be narrowed down to your mindset. Rahkim Sabree.